for the Global Forum, which will be hosted by the OECD again this December, we'll be sharing with you South Africa's experience of using market studies to tackle emerging competition issues. This is a power that the Competition Commission is empowered in terms of the Competition Act. This is a power that we use to look into the general state of competition in a market. Market inquiries are different from investigations as they look broadly into any feature or features in a market that may distort markets, unlike looking at the conduct of an individual firm. The inquiries are initiated with the aim of uncovering competition concerns in those markets and coming up with appropriate remedies and policy reforms to restore competition. This allows the Commission to make evidence-based recommendations that remedy, mitigate, or prevent adverse competition. This power is rooted on the Competition Act, which was passed in 1998, which is one of the transformative legislation in South Africa to address the apartheid legacy, which excluded the majority of South Africans from participating in the mainstream economy. So with this instrument, we look at distortions that are there in the market with a view to addressing them. The Act had a broad power to look at measures that increase transparency in a market. This allowed us to conduct a market inquiry into the banking sector. However, the law has since been amended twice, 2013 and 2018, to strengthen the ability of the Commission to conduct these market studies and also to remedy effectively the distortions that are found in markets. This is so because in the past, the Commission could make recommendations that were not binding on firms, but this has changed with the recent amendments. This is to initiate an inquiry. The Commission can initiate inquiries on its own. It can also do so at the request of the Minister of Trade, Industry and Competition. The process is quite transparent. The terms of reference have to be published to the public to comment, and also the timeframes within which the inquiry will be concluded. In the main, the inquiries look into the structure of the market, levels of concentration, and many distortions, as well as aspects that talk to the exclusion of others to participate in the market. With the inquiry, there can be recommendations to regulatory bodies, to government, to policymakers to remedy the adverse effects or distortions that have been would have been identified in that inquiry. The Competition Commission can also initiate an investigation, can also, based on the information obtained, enter into settlement agreements or consent agreements, as we call them in South Africa, with the affected firms. We have since completed 5 banking market inquiries. We have completed the banking inquiry, which looked at the high cost of banking in South Africa, particularly the exclusion of the majority who were unbanked. There were various reforms recommended, and these were quite embraced by the stakeholders and have since been implemented to the benefit of many consumers who were who previously could not bank. Also, we have seen costs of banking declining significantly. We concluded an inquiry on the liquid petroleum gas. This is a market where we found structural features that made it difficult for smaller players to participate in the market, but also there were barriers in this market that were entrenched with incumbents having a stranglehold on the market. There were regulatory recommendations also here to address these challenges. The health inquiry looked at the cost of private healthcare in South Africa. This is so because over time these prices had been increasing. So South Africa has this peculiar environment where the health services majority also are offered by the private sector. So we had to look into this. The study found very high costs of private medical care, but also a plethora of regulations that have not enabled competition in the market. We have had recommendations to address this, and engagements with all the relevant stakeholders are ongoing. The data market inquiry looked at high data prices in South Africa, which were found to be high, but also discriminated against the poor. These the parties that were looked at into these market inquiries have agreed to reduce prices, which was quite a groundbreaking intervention, given that prices had been sticky for quite some time. There are also regulatory recommendations that we are currently engaging with the relevant policymakers and the sector regulator. Finally, we had the grocery retail market inquiry, which addressed competition issues in grocery retail, primarily exclusivity in shopping centers and restrictions on competitors to participate in certain lines of business. We have made significant recommendations, and we have had major retailers coming forward agreeing to do away with these kinds of exclusivity. We are also engaging with policymakers, government regulators to look into addressing the regulatory challenges that have been identified in this sector. There are indeed lessons to be learned from these inquiries. They have enabled us to introduce market reforms that otherwise would not have been possible if we were using blunt instruments of investigations. This has been quite useful for South Africa. It's also important to note that stakeholders that were affected in these inquiries have embraced recommendations of the Commission and implemented the bulk of the recommendations. These successes we've seen in these markets, particularly through our inquiries into the data markets and retail, do show that this is a tool that we could continuously use as the authorities, and it's a tool that allows us to address distortions in a more holistic way. It is becoming quite useful, not just for regulators in South Africa, but also in other countries. We have noted that these inquiries sometimes can be costly. Initially, when we did this, we would outsource to panels, but we've now realized that the best maybe way forwards to contain the costs would be to manage this internally and populate a team to handle these inquiries, and where necessary, we can source outside expertise. It is important to ensure that there's coordination with the regulators to ensure buy-in, and also for overall policy coordination. And we have found that with this instrument, we are able to engage all stakeholders in the economy, and in this way, we have been able to address a number of challenges that our economy has faced. So this instrument is proving quite a useful a tool to address distortions that we find in markets. We will be sharing more of this at the next global forum, spending more time on this case studies and lessons learned from this, but equally we look forward to also learning from other authorities that have been applying these tools to ensure that we continuously review, reassess, and sharpen this instrument for sustainable enforcement, that will continuously bear fruit. We look forward to seeing you next global forum.